Welcome to The Scoop. We're coming to you live from the TaiwanPlus newsroom in downtown Taipei. I'm Andrew Ryan here today with two of our reporters, Joyce Zheng and Jaime Okan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
We're going to be doing this every Thursday between now and January 13th. That's the day that Taiwan goes to the polls. And we're going to be doing it every afternoon at 3 p.m. And we would love to know who you are and where you're watching from today. Big warm welcome to all of our viewers around the world joining us not only on Facebook, but also starting today on YouTube as well. There are 37 days left until Taiwan votes for a new president. This is our 10th episode of The Scoop. And today, as we mentioned, we have Joyce Zheng, who is the lead on our tech desk. Now, Joyce has been on our program before. But Jaime, this is your first time on our show. You are the head of our defense desk. Are you excited to be on The Scoop?
I am. I've been seeing you guys doing this for the past couple weeks, and I kind of feel a little left out, you know?
Well, now you're finally joining it just when things get, kind of exciting, right?
Heating up in the election race.
So we have a tech reporter, we have a defense reporter, and the topic of our show today is chips and ships. Who wants to explain chips and ships quickly for us? What does that mean? Why are we putting these two things together?
Please, go for it.
Well, I mean, most of the time when you hear Taiwan in the news, it's usually about two things, China, but also semiconductors. And so that's kind of where the chips and ships the combo comes from.
You're chips, because
Yes,
you're a tech
from
person.
tech.
You're
that makes me ships.
Yeah.
So
either of you have any chips or ships?
Not on me right now, but but it's important.
Actually, you probably do. Cell phone,
That's
computer.
true.
That's true. I think one thing we should note is that this chips and ships, right? So whenever you hear Taiwan in the news, unfortunately, it's shadowed by either semiconductors or aggression from China. So the chips and ships is a play on words where we have chips, semiconductors, and you have ships, which is Chinese military ships always harassing Taiwan. So that's the name of this episode today.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a big connection between these two things, as you're going to find out in just a moment. Now, Jaime, you recently traveled to Washington, D.C., and you had the opportunity to interview Taiwan's representative to the United States, or at least she was at the time, Beim Sha. Now, you sat down with her, you touched on a number of different issues, and of course, as you might guess, one of the topics was related to ships and chips. Have a look at this.
Another area of cooperation between the United States and Taiwan has been in chip production, and Taiwan is beginning to set up fabs in Arizona and Ohio. What are the implications of Taiwan moving those factories to these states?
Well, I think it's clear that Taiwanese businesses want to continue to expand their global influence, global market share, and as Taiwanese businesses expand their global presence and global footprint, so does Taiwan's broader economic influence.
But some have argued that this might be concerning for Taiwan in the sense of it might make it vulnerable. Does that shift of establishing chip fabs in the United States make Taiwan more vulnerable?
Well, I think what we're saying is, we're not moving anything away from Taiwan. Instead, we are basing ourselves in Taiwan and expanding our global influence. So this is, it's a false dichotomy. It's not a trade-off, either Taiwan or somewhere else.
This is The Scoop, and we're coming to you live from the TaiwanPlus newsroom in downtown Taipei. Now, in that last clip that you just watched there, I do want to point out a style point, and that is we are calling Beim Sha by Beim Sha, but you might have seen her name strap in that piece was Xiao Bekim. The reason is that her name, when we say it in Taiwan, is Xiao Bekim, as in the way you'd say it in Taiwanese or Taiwanese Hokkien. It follows the family name first, given name second. However, as the representative to the United States, which she has since stepped down from that position, she was using Beim Sha.
Yes.
So we're going to do our best to follow the current style, the current TaiwanPlus style, and it's also her campaign style for vice presidential campaign style for her name.
That's right.
Another thing I wanted to point out, you talked about vulnerability that might come from TSMC moving its fabs to the United States. Quick just point on that. Of course, this is because there's an understanding called the silicon shield. We're going to be talking about it a little bit later in our show, but basically the idea is that silicon chips are one of Taiwan's most important resources. Having those in Taiwan would protect Taiwan. But I want to talk to you, Jaime, about how you got the chance to interview Beim Sha.
It was kind of, I mean, it was a pleasant surprise because our agenda was full going to DC at the end of September for this US-Taiwan Defense Industry Conference. It's basically this roundtable where we talk about what are the best ways to defend Taiwan. And those are US delegates, Taiwanese delegates, members of the defense ministry. And then for the first time, I think representatives from all three major parties, the TPP, the DPP, the KMT, they all sent representatives as well. So we were in the middle of our scheduling and our producer managed to get us a slot after celebrating Double 10th Day,
which is
in DC.
Taiwan's National Day, the Republic
Absolutely.
of China National Day. Yep.
And we managed to get a slot. So it was kind of interesting seeing her kind of more in an informal party setting, and then the day after, very, she brings this presence to any room, and she's very, steadfast on, giving Taiwan a good name. So I mean, it was an absolute, super memorable experience, and I'm hoping to interview her again, maybe, in the future.
Absolutely. Now, what's interesting is that, since you interviewed her, she has announced her candidacy for vice president. So it will be interesting to see how her role shifts from being Taiwan's representative to the United States to now being a vice presidential candidate for one of Taiwan's two biggest parties. Now, Joyce, you've also interacted with Bi Kim-hsiao. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Last month, I saw Bi Kim-hsiao in San Francisco for the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Leader Summit. So that's a rare international platform that Taiwan can attend to. So that's an economic, forum that includes 21 member economies. And Bi Kim-hsiao was there, kind of part of the Taiwanese delegation, but also hosting them as Taiwan's representative in the U.S. And it's interesting that you were saying Bi Kim-hsiao definitely has this presence, when she's in the room. But she's also said before in interviews that, she's also super versatile player in the sense that she knows when to be outspoken, but also knows when to be more like low-key. And I think at the APEC summit, she definitely took that more low-key stance because the lead envoy there was TSMC founder Morris Chang. But, as soon as that week was over and she came right back to Taiwan after San Francisco and announced her VP candidacy.
Yeah.
And I think from there she's gone back to the outspoken.
The cat warrior that we all know.
Yes, you switched into campaign mode. Now, it's interesting. I do want to bring up, at the very end of your interview, you did ask her, what are the chances that you will be on the ticket?
I mean, how can you not? I mean, I feel like she thought that I wasn't going to ask because, they'd asked for questions before. And of course, I mean, everyone wants to know what are her plans. So towards the end, I asked her, and of course, she gave me, the answer that she gave everyone. It's like, we're not talking about that. And then a couple weeks later, it's like, wait a minute, I think you might have known already,
Yeah, but of course, when you're a skilled campaigner, you know when to let out some secrets and when to keep them your cards close to your chest. Yep. Now, of course, she's on the campaign trail now with Lai Ching-te, who is the presidential candidate for the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party. He is currently vice president, running for president. And that brings us to the polls. We want to talk a little bit about what the latest polls show, not just for the DPP ticket, but also for the other two major tickets that are running. Have a look at these polls. So this is fresh off the presses, fresh out of the oven. There's got to be a good way to say this. There's a metaphor I'm looking for. The DPP ticket shows them at 40.1%, so they're ahead by more than 8 points. The KMT ticket, 31.6%. So that's a big lead for the DPP at this point. The TPP ticket, the Taiwan People's Party, is trailing by nearly 17 points with about 14.8% in that opinion poll by myformosa.com. Now, to compare it to last week's figures, last week, I guess the DPP has now gone up about 4 percentage points. The TPP has gone down by about 4 percentage points. Jaime, what do you make of these numbers?
I mean, it just looks like the dust is kind of settling from that madness that was 2 weeks ago, or I think a couple weeks ago, this Lambaihe, this attempt at a coalition ticket between the TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, and the KMT, the Kuomintang. And it just looks like, I mean, the TPP has had somewhat of a lead. I don't know how big of a lead, but for the past couple weeks, KMT, I mean, standing still at 31%. But if you're the TPP, it's a little concerning that you're still, you can't manage to get a little bit ahead in the percentage of, going down another 4%. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see with less than a month out. There doesn't seem that much time to kind of gain that momentum that you need.
It's really interesting. I was talking with an analyst last night, and he was saying that he thinks that a lot of the TPP, Taiwan People's Party, their numbers have gone over to the DPP. Originally, they were performing very well because there was a big protest vote. So people who were not interested in either of the two major parties that have ruled Taiwan for so long, people that wanted a third option, now that we've kind of settled into familiar patterns, we're back into that binary that people are really used to here in Taiwan, the KMT and the DPP. The TPP is really struggling to get the numbers.
And there was also that fourth option before, and now with three, options, it looks like people are now really, really solidifying who they want to be their next leader.
Yeah. So people are going back to what they're familiar with. Now, when we hear about Taiwan in the news, it's usually about China or semiconductors, as we have mentioned. When we think about semiconductors, of course, we think of one company, that's Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, TSMC. It's the biggest contract chip maker in the world. Now, Joyce, you recently traveled to Arizona, where TSMC is currently building a fab, a chip fab on U.S. soil.
Two, actually.
Two chip fabs on U.S. soil.
Yes.
Have a look at this video.
This is where TSMC is building its chip factories or fabs in North Phoenix, about a 30-minute drive from the city center. Now, it's been 3 years since the big project reveal, and despite projections, the site is far from finished.
By being in Arizona, TSMC is now neighbors with American military tech customers Honeywell Aerospace and Raytheon Missiles and Defense, the makers of some of the weapons needed to defend Taiwan. The stakes are high for TSMC to be successful here, as expectations from business partners, innovators, and national security leaders mount for TSMC chips made in the USA. Justin Wu and Joyce Sun in Phoenix, Arizona for TaiwanPlus.
You're watching The Scoop, and we're coming to you live from the TaiwanPlus newsroom in downtown Taipei. I'm Andrew Ryan, joined today by two of our reporters, Joyce Sung and Jaime Okan. We want to tell you about our object of the week. Jaime, will you do the honors?
Yes, with, let's see, drum roll, please. Ta-da!
So this looks like a tripod to me.
I mean, yeah, I'll try to not, show the logo maybe. No free advertising here.
Yeah. And so we should ask you, what does this have to do with Taiwan's presidential elections? Now, I think you're probably thinking, oh, this must be TaiwanPlus reporting on the scene, right?
Probably, yeah.
Using a tripod.
Yeah, exactly, and the best footage possible. But
we always do, right? But no, we actually have something more general than that, not specifically related to TaiwanPlus and our reporters. What's the connection between this and the election here in Taiwan? If you have an idea, let me know. We have a comment from one of our viewers. Jen Delari says, I'm not familiar with the fourth option, barely familiar with the TPP as it is. Just a reminder, the fourth option was Terry Guo, who is the founder of Foxconn, which is the world's largest electronics maker, contract electronics maker. They make iPhones, things like that. He has now dropped out of the race. So we won't have, I believe it was Taiwan's sixth most richest man that was running.
He's up there.
He's one of the top people, yeah. So let's talk about chips and tech. So we'll leave the ships aside for just a moment, Jaime.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Joyce, tell us about your trip to the United States. What was your plan when you were there?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was in the U.S., I was covering two main topics. Earlier, I'd mentioned the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Summit, so that was in San Francisco. Rare regional economic forum that Taiwan can be a part of, and CHIPS was obviously also a big kind of talking point there, because the lead envoy for Taiwan was the TSMC founder, Morris Chang. He's represented President Tsai over the past 6 years, so kind of goes to show TSMC's role in Taiwan's kind of global face. But earlier, I also had the chance to go to Phoenix, Arizona, where TSMC has put in, one of the largest foreign investments America, like the United States, has ever seen. The biggest direct foreign investment the state has seen, $40 billion to build 2 chip fabs.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. And it's not been smooth sailing. They were projecting to start making these very in-demand advanced chips next year, but that's all been pushed 1 year because of, they've said there's labor, concerns or labor shortages, that's skilled labor, because with such high-tech pieces.
I mean, we can't apply for those jobs, right?
No. I don't know anything about chips.
Well, maybe after 10 days at a community college.
Yes, so you actually did a report on
we
this.
saw
Joyce
that,
did a
yeah.
report where she actually went and interviewed a community college that's training people to be able to do jobs at a semiconductor manufacturing fab in 10 days?
Exactly, yes.
Wow.
I mean, because talent is a huge other part of this equation that local educators are really trying to put in their resources there to fill up not just TSMC fabs, but all the other semiconductor companies that are now pouring into not just Arizona, but the U.S. in general, but also this expanding trend.
You were telling me that like right next door, there's other tech manufacturing hubs and also other companies that just decided like, hey, if TSMC's here, we need to set up shop as well. And it's just fascinating also with like APEC, the forum you went to, just the fact that, understanding Taiwan's political situation, but the fact that, a company is representing a country, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't representing Taiwan in his capacity
Absolutely,
as, he was doing it in a private capacity, probably.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, obviously, it's really hard to,
to pull those two roles apart, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he does command, immense respect from, all these global leaders because of what he's done with TSMC and how that's fed into Taiwan's economy and also just like global reputation.
Yeah. What's really interesting about your pieces that you sent to us from Arizona is how like dry and arid it looks. It's like just flat as can be, and then you see this massive like TSMC factory there. It's such a striking image.
Definitely.
And it looks like it's like pretty complete from the front, but then from the back you realize it's just a facade.
Yeah, and I mean the TSMC site was about 30 minutes away from downtown Phoenix, and as we were driving out, you just see this like vast like just brown kind of like desert land. I mean, it's a desert.
It is a desert.
I don't know what else I was
fair enough.
expecting.
Yeah.
But then suddenly this, site comes out in the middle of nowhere, and that's pretty intentional because with TSMC picking that site, it has all these acres of land to build, further in the future, and maybe you have other suppliers come in and join. So,
and you were saying also that defense manufacturers, a lot of them are located in that area as well.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
So interesting.
So they're all kind of now integrated in this ecosystem because that proximity, it turns out to be very helpful from a business perspective.
Yeah.
From the COVID-19 pandemic where logistics and transportation really became an issue for a lot of these businesses. It's strategic to actually set up shop physically close to your
in
key
your borders,
customers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell us about the silicon shield. What is that about?
Yeah, so if we take a step back, silicon refers to the raw material that chips are made out of, and that's essentially sand. And the idea there is basically just the sheer global reliance on Taiwan's chips because almost all of the world's advanced chips are made in Taiwan. That sheer global reliance is enough to make China kind of think twice about attacking Taiwan. Morris Chang himself, the TSMC founder, has been a vocal proponent of that idea that keeping the most advanced tech and know-how in Taiwan is helpful for Taiwan's security. But there's also been plenty of voices, whether that's industry leaders or analysts, who kind of think the silicon shield is more of a myth. That some think that China's motivation to attack Taiwan is more emotional or it's a historic kind of thing, so that economic factors are not really going to sway them. But others will also say that actually expanding Taiwan's very mature chips manufacturing industry overseas can help build, international partnerships through trade.
And trade partnerships,
Exactly, which is key because Taiwan has very few official diplomatic allies given its position with China. And but business relationships are fair game, and so kind of trade is seen as another way to defend Taiwan.
It's this whole notion of like chip diplomacy. It's like, we'll give you some chips in return to maybe for some international recognition, maybe, because of the way that Taiwan is positioned. Yeah.
Now, you also had a chance to interview Taiwan's chief trade negotiator, John Deng, who also shared this same view that trade is very important for protecting Taiwan. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, exactly. So John Deng, he's really the one at the table at these international talks trying to build Taiwan's economic relationships with different countries. As previously mentioned, Taiwan has very few diplomatic allies, but having business, these business links being fair game, he's really kind of saying that the more relationships Taiwan can build through trade, that's a more effective way to defend the country.
Now, you also asked him specifically about chip diplomacy. Here's what he had to say.
Taiwan's valuable chips ecosystem is kind of expanding internationally. Does that weaken Taiwan's edge in any way or weaken its defense?
We don't think so. Now, in the case of TSMC, you see they expand to the United States, Germany, Japan. Those are the three countries that they are currently is building up their fabs there. We think it is expansion of Taiwan's strength. This is not weakening. Taiwan has its limit. Our resources, our water, electricity, talent, all have its limit. We cannot accommodate this unlimited expansion here.
You're watching The Scoop, and we're coming to you live from the TaiwanPlus newsroom. We have an object of the week. Jaime, can you show us what we have here?
Ta-da.
It's a tripod, so you don't have to guess what it is.
Yeah,
we told you
I
the
guess
answer.
we just said it, yeah.
The question is, what is the connection between this tripod and Taiwan's elections? Not this tripod.
Not
between
specifically this
tripods.
one. Just,
yes. Now, we do have, somebody has written in here, Jen Delari is guessing, with all those clamps on it, I'm betting that's a multi-microphone thing for all the different news sources to get their own sound, but that seems so 1980s TV news. Interesting guess.
Very interesting.
Very creative guess.
Not quite, but I love the energy on
Love
that.
the creativity, yeah.
We also have a question from Dennis J. Says, how will the election affect China-Taiwan cross-strait relations if the DPP wins? Jaime.
Well, so if the DPP wins, it looks like, from what we've seen from William Lai, it looks like it's going to be a continuation of Tsai Ing-wen's policies.
This is Lai Ching-te, the vice president and
yes.
the current candidate for president for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party.
Yeah, it looks like we won't strain too much, in the sense of different policies. We went to DC to speak to each one of the representatives from these political parties, and it looks like for right now, because of the situation, how kind of tender it is, it looks like most will kind of stay the course and keep the status quo. What happens after, we don't know, but it looks like, it's a continuation of what Tsai Ing-wen's doing right now, which is maintaining peace and security in the Taiwan Strait.
What's interesting is that we could see a DPP presidency, but we're probably also likely to see the DPP not getting a majority in the legislature. So the legislature here in Taiwan, which could be KMT majority or close to majority, is going to have a lot to say about the policies of whatever president comes into office on May 20th, which is the day that they get inaugurated. Now, we have talked about chips. I think we need to move on now to ships. Probably the biggest issue on people's minds during a presidential election in Taiwan is, of course, China, the threat of China, the possibility that China could attack. Candidates' policies about how to deal with the threat of a Chinese invasion can also have a big impact on the way that people vote. Have a look at this.
Taiwanese soldiers quickly moving into defensive positions. Then one by one, machine guns and anti-aircraft guns open fire. These troops are training to defend the beach against an all-out amphibious invasion. It's part of the country's largest annual war games, known as the Hangguang exercises, which simulate an attack by China.
There has been a realization that the People's Republic of China now has almost the military force to take Taiwan, and Taiwan needs to enhance its self-defense in response. And in particular, Taiwan needs to be able to keep the Chinese military from landing on the island.
Taiwan's military said that this entire area behind me is a red beach. That means if China were to conduct an attack, it would be one of the most likely ports of entry. The beach isn't rocky, and it's next to a major port and city. There are about 14 of these red beaches on the main island, but this one is one of the closest to the capital city, Taipei, which is why Taiwan has been making sure areas like these are even more fortified.
You're watching This Scoop, and we're coming to you live from the TaiwanPlus newsroom. We're going to do this every Thursday between now and the elections. There are 37 days to go before Taiwan goes to the polls on January 13th. Now, Jaime, in that last piece there, you were talking about red beaches. Is the sand red?
You would think so, but it's not. So a red beach is basically, so Taiwan's Ministry of Defense has identified 14 beaches, and they've labeled them as red because these are the most likely and these are the most suitable beaches if China was going to pick a spot to attack. So you might be asking, what makes a beach suitable? Well, you need large spaces.
This is if they're going to make a landing, right?
Yes, if they're going to make if they're going to cross that over 100-kilometer stretch of the Taiwan Strait.
Yeah.
They need to land troops and armored vehicles and all this type of things. You can't just land it anywhere. And what's really unique about Taiwan is that the majority of these red beaches are on that west coast. You can't kind of circle around to the east coast because
West coast, which is on the China side.
yeah,
yes.
facing China. So there's 14 of these locations, and the exercise that we were there in July, that was part of Hangguang. That's Taiwan's largest military exercise. They're an annual drill. And basically what Taiwan's been doing is doubling down defense in these areas because it kind of has its work cut out for it. If you make sure these positions are reinforced, you have a better chance of fending off an enemy.
Very interesting. Now, how prepared is Taiwan to defend itself against China, from your estimation?
Ever since I started working with TaiwanPlus and covering these defense issues in the past 2.5 years, it's pretty remarkable seeing the amount of progress that Taiwan has made, looking at not only lessons from Ukraine, but looking at trying to rely on itself more for its defense capabilities. It's making a drone fleet, so basically making hundreds of these drones to not only save the men and women that are serving our Taiwan's sovereignty, but also making sure that because these drones are so cheap, you're basically using technology to bridge the gap between China and Taiwan. Taiwan, unfortunately, will probably never be able to spend as much as China in defense. But by using this technology, it can kind of edge that gap.
So really, Taiwan is leaning into asymmetric warfare. So it's not necessarily the big items. It's kind of smaller, more agile, movable items. You've seen a lot of different things. You've been to a lot of different exercises. I also have to be very honest. Prior to coming to TaiwanPlus and seeing all the reporting that you are doing, I don't think we saw that many military exercises. I knew about Hangguang every year. Wennen, I think we were familiar with that
the civil
too.
defense drill, yes.
But it seems like there are drills almost every month.
I think a good way to look at it is that, like, for example, we come to work and we write scripts, we write reports, right? Well, if you're in the military, what do? You have to train. So, every year, whether it be an Air Force or Navy drill, I understand that, because the sensitivity of the issue, they don't let media look at all the exercises. But when we do have an opportunity to go and chat with the people that are there, it's just, the scale of these things. You saw the drill, it's just, armored vehicles and tanks and just showing, it's more of a reassurance to the public that we are doing everything we can to defend Taiwan.
I have to ask you, what's the coolest thing you've done as a defense reporter?
The coolest thing I've done as a defense reporter, I think I managed to take 15 minutes to learn, or to try to learn, how to fly Taiwan's indigenous defense fighter. That's one of the fighter jets. So one of the
They
Air
didn't
Force,
let you into a real jet, did they?
No, they did not. It's a simulation. It's a simulation. Exactly. No, I'm a pretty good flyer. No. And it was super. It's a U.S. led program, and we got in, and it's very fascinating just to see the type of training they do, but.
It's a trainer jet, so it's like a simulator with like a computer
almost
screen.
like a video game. I don't want to be too insensitive, but it's it looks easy, but I can't imagine the amount of pressure that those Air Force pilots are in.
Yeah. Comparing the two of you both have very cool jobs, tech and defense, but yours sounds like particularly interactive.
It gets the blood pumping, it's a lot of adrenaline, but I think just looking at the actual steps that Taiwan is taking, I think that's, so worthwhile. And then especially being so close, like a couple of weeks ago, we were in Taidong in eastern Taiwan, and just seeing the fighter jets go off on the runway so close. It's I'll remember this for the rest of my life. You know?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that Jaime and a videographer have gotten on one of those like 5 a.m.
Those
airplanes, military
yeah.
airplanes with like bare bones infrastructure inside of it.
No in-flight
Yikes.
service, no drinks or peanuts or anything.
No drinks or peanuts.
Yeah.
You've got the over the
Yeah,
shoulder
you're clipped
straps,
everything, yeah.
and like you're sitting up against the side walls of the
Yeah.
plane.
Yeah.
But I'm really grateful for all of your reporting, yours as well, because I think these are two really,
Yeah.
really important areas. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the defense policies of our three main presidential candidates. So I have our whiteboard here. I want to thank the person who wrote in and said that I look like Katie Porter with the whiteboard. That was like the nicest thing that I think anybody has said to me ever. So yeah, these are our three presidential candidates. Let's start off with, and we do make an effort, I just wanted to point out, we make an effort to put them in alphabetical order by the first letter of their last name. So I'm not choosing preferences, we're just going in order. Let's start off with Hou You-yi, who is the presidential candidate for the main opposition Kuomintang, or KMT. What is his defense policy like?
So it's really interesting. So Hou You-yi actually made a trip to the United States, I think in the early summer, and he kind of came up with this policy of the 3 Ds. So that is deterrence, dialogue, and de-escalation with China. So they all recognize the threat from across the Taiwan Strait. But Hou You-yi's approach is basically getting to a level where you can de-escalate enough to where Taiwan can maybe reverse conscription, which is mandatory military service. It was extended to 1 year last year in 2022 or beginning of 2023 by President Tsai Ing-wen. And he wants to reduce that back to 4 months as a sign that we are trying to de-escalate the situation.
So that's a play to younger voters, younger male voters
younger male
in
voters that will have
particular.
to go into military service for 1 year, yeah.
Great. Let's move on to Ko Wen-je. He's the former Taipei mayor.
Yeah.
He is running on the Taiwan People's Party, or TPP ticket, not to be confused with the DPP, TPP. What is his policy?
So we haven't heard much from Ko about conscription, but he has talked about defense spending. So Ko Wen-je wants to raise military spending to 3%. That's up from the 2.5% that we're currently spending, as a way to kind of be more self-reliant and boost Taiwan's domestic defense industry. So that's kind of his main kind of push that he's doing. But when conscription, he hasn't said too much because it is a pretty sensitive topic.
Okay, let's move on now finally to Lai Ching-te, who's the current vice president of Taiwan, but now he's running for president. Again, this is for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. What's his defense policy? So
in terms of defense spending, it looks like maybe Taiwan will stay the course and spending around 2.5%. Conscription will stay the same because of what Tsai Ing-wen input last year. But it's really interesting. I mean, Lai Ching-te has wanted to kind of push exchanges with neighboring countries like Japan and maybe further cooperation with the U.S., but trying to stay the course of what Tsai Ing-wen has set up, which is this reliance on asymmetric defense, strategy, which is, not buying a tank and maybe buying a rocket launcher so that you get your more money's worth when it comes to, in the event of a possible conflict.
So interesting. It's nice to have it kind of all narrowed down to a very kind of bite-sized portion.
And really quickly, these defense policies are, on our website if people want to go and read for themselves. The defense policies are on TaiwanPlus.com in the 2024 election section. I feel like it's right in your face when you get into the website.
That's correct. And our reporters have been working very hard to collect all of the policies of these different candidates. You might be interested to know that the policies are often posted as Facebook posts on the candidates' pages. So they are really, digging through the internet, looking for policies wherever they may appear, sourcing them, and then translating them to English, putting them on the candidates' pages in our election website. Now, we do have an object of the week. Can we pull that out one last time and see if anybody knows what this is? So this is clearly a tripod. What is the connection to the election?
Should we maybe, what if we give a hint? Should we say that we should be focusing on this lower part?
Yeah. Or the three legs?
Yeah, I guess,
I think we're going to go ahead and give you the answer. I don't think we have any more guesses coming in from our viewers around the world. So the reason why we say this actually has to do with something that we often see in the Chinese headlines in the press here in Taiwan, which is 三角都. 三角都. In Taiwanese, it's 三角都. Help me out here. Our videographers are kind of, they're doing this, which means say it for me. How do you say it? Sakato.
Sakato.
Sakato. The point is that this is a three-legged object. It's basically saying that this is a three-legged race between our three candidates. Although three-legged race is really two people with their legs tied together, right? So it's
Pretty
not really a
much,
three-legged
yeah.
race. It's three different people running against each other. So it's like a kind of like a what do you call it? A tripod.
A tricycle
Oh wow!
race?
We answered our own
Yeah,
question.
exactly. It's like, do we get a prize?
Yeah, I think we do. We just guessed it. So if you see this in a Chinese headline for an election story here in Taiwan, it's because you have these three opposing forces which are vying for the same thing, which in this case is the presidency. Yeah.
I thought we were going to say tripod.
No. Vying for the tripod.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoever wins the election gets the
the-
tripod. We have a couple more comments here. We have from Jen Delari. While I figure that the Chinese would go for Taiwan proper right away, I've always wondered how the outlying islands have been safe being so close to the Chinese mainland, some within loudspeaker distance. That's right. There's a huge wall
Yeah.
of speakers in Jinmen and a couple of them, and in Matsu as well. So what's interesting is I actually interviewed the county chief of Lianjiang County, which is where Matsu is, and he said that he characterized it that the island is not a front line, it's more like the houdun. So it's like the backup support.
Yes.
He says that if you have weapons that are like missiles, you're going to strike Taiwan, they're going to fly right over the top of the outlying islands. This is very different from back in the 1950s.
Where everything was,
Yeah, when they actually were, in kind of live fire combat with those islands.
And also for people are curious. Actually, so the way that Taiwan's military is structured, 80% of all forces are on the main island and 20% on the outlying. So, I mean, if you were going to be play the potential scenario, I mean, it would only draw attention, and that's the last thing you want in warfare. So, to answer your question, if China wouldn't risk what it's been trying to do for the past decades on a tiny island, it would probably try to do as much as possible. So I don't think that's going to happen.
I've also heard of what they call decapitation. So basically,
Yeah.
they go straight for the leader, which would, obviously be here on the main island of Taiwan.
Kind of what
Do it quickly.
Kind of
yeah.
what Russia attempted to do with Ukraine and Kyiv, but was but has failed.
Yeah. We have a couple more comments here. Apparently, Dennis J. guessed correctly. The tripod represents the three parties running.
Wow,
Well done. Well done. Sorry, I missed that.
Maybe you should come on the show.
Also, a question from Dennis J. In case of a war with China, would Taiwan open a humanitarian corridor to places like Japan and the Philippines, resulting in a mass exodus of Taiwanese people from the island?
I actually did a story on this. So, I mean, there's been more and more civil defense exercises where it's not to cause alarm, but to kind of, conduct exercises of what you would do. So, Yonaguni Island, which is the closest Japanese island in the Okinawa prefecture on the east of Taiwan, I think it's about 70 to 100 kilometers. I mean, you can see it on a clear day. They've conducted exercises where, the civilians there practice how to conduct first aid. What would they do? Do you have the proper transportation set up? And the Philippines have said that, it's only an hour and a half, 2 hour flight from the Philippines to Kaohsiung. So it would be very, very likely that if something was to happen, its allies and partners, especially being so close to the US, would try to help out in the sense of human rights.
Yeah. Really hard to say what will happen. A lot of this is conjecture, so take it all with a grain of salt. We want to thank you for joining us today. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Jaime and Joyce, what does Taiwan need more of, chips or ships? But before that, just a reminder that you've been watching The Scoop. We're coming to you every Thursday at 3 p.m. Taiwan time, at 7 a.m. in London, 12:30 p.m. in New Delhi, and 11 p.m. in Los Angeles. We'll be with you every Thursday until the elections on January 13th. There are 37 days to go. We hope you will join us for the remaining episodes. Also, do visit us at TaiwanPlus.com and wherever you can find your social media news from Taiwan Plus, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have a new live stream of this show. And also, what am I forgetting? Twitter. X. How could I forget that? So what do you think, Jaime? What does Taiwan need more of, ships or chips?
I think we need more of the good chips, less of the Chinese ships, and I guess more Taiwanese ships, I guess, is that what you were saying?
Those are all ships.
Yeah, these are chips. I said Taiwanese semiconductor. We need more Taiwanese semiconductors. And less
Is that your
Chinese
final
ships.
answer?
Oh, Joyce, you go ahead.
Well, I agree. As lead tech reporter, I'm inclined to also say chips, and also because
Chips with a C, yeah,
yes,
not with an
the
S.
C, the
yes.
semiconductors.
Yes.
I mean, we really have to appreciate that these tiny, like some of them are, the size of your fingernail. They really power anything
worlds,
electronic
yeah.
that you can think of, including advanced, defense systems. So I'm also inclined to say chips.
They
with a
say
C.
that girls run the world, but I think chips also
Chips
do,
run
right?
the world. Yeah, absolutely.
They really
Well,
do.
thank you so much for watching this scoop. On behalf of Joyce Tseng and Jaime Okan, I'm Andrew Ryan. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Cool, yeah.
That was great. One of my favorite episodes.